You are listening to Through the Void Gate, a Warcaster podcast for new and experienced players. What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to episode 2 of Through the Void Gate. Once again, I'm joined by Andrew Lynch. Welcome back, Andrew.
Hello, everybody, or Glass of Dead, as you may know me.
I meant to mention that. Thank you.
It's whatever. It works.
It was in my plan. So, we have a ton of news to cover this week. It has been quite the exciting week for Warcaster. Let's just jump right into it. If you pay attention to the Kickstarter emails you get, the first batch has been shipped. So watch your email. You should get a tracking number if you were part of the first batch. They say that the whole process will take about 2 weeks to complete. And anyone that's rocking the Continuum, your stuff will be in the second half of those 2 weeks because they weren't originally intending on shipping that. Some lucky people, cough Andrew, already have their stuff.
That's not entirely true. I was given a few test kits, as a lot of other YouTubers were, but I wasn't given the whole thing. I was given, the model just on their own, and then I begged Privateer Press, can I have some dice and some other stuff so that I can actually play the game? And luckily they said yes. But I haven't done an unboxing because I never had the actual box. I haven't had the final product. I got given everything kind of a few weeks apart from each other. And now we've got to get onto the gripes, right? That's what every podcast is really about, I'm sure. I obviously went all in on the Kickstarter when it first was announced because I was hyped. And I got the AC, the Eternus Continuum, and I'm in Europe, and I'm a little bit scared about just how long it's going to be until I get my actual packages after the first wave is out. If I'm only a month slower, a month behind the US, I'll be okay with it. But I'm a little bit scared, yeah.
I mean, I'm in Canada, so I'm in a similar boat. Obviously not to the same extreme, but we'll probably be a week or two behind the States as well. Especially,
oh, really?
Yeah, COVID kind of slows down the whole customs thing at the border, so...
That makes sense.
Mail's been moving a little slower, but here's for hoping, right? So...
Exactly.
The AC will be in the latter half of the shipping. We have a list of what is shipping in the first wave, so I'm just going to run down that because it changed a little. In the Marcher's starter, there will be the Duskwolf A, which is the original sculpt we saw, with the original weapon and heads. The alternate sculpts and weapon pack B will be in Wave 2, and that goes for all the jacks. A Ranger Fire Team, the Male Weaver, and the Male Hunter. The ISA starter will contain the Firebrand A and Firebrand A weapons and heads. Paladin Enforcers, Paladin Weavers, the Paladin Weaver Male, and Paladin Commander Female. The AC starter will have the Scourge A and the Scourge A weapons and heads. Vassal Reavers, the Male Marauder, and the Female Weaver. And then the variant solos for all three factions will be going out, which is the Marcher's Female Weaver and Hunter. Some of you already have that because that was going to be the Adepticon exclusive. For the Iron Star Alliance, it's going to be the Male Paladin Commander. And for the AC, it'll be their Male Weaver. Anything from the starters that could be ordered individually will also be shipped out. So for the Marchers, that is the Combat Engineer and the Ranger Heavy Support. For the ISA, that is the Paladin Aegis. I despise that word. Aegeus?
It is the worst word, right? I just go for it and say Aegis, but I'm sure that's wrong.
Yeah. So if someone wants to correct us in the comments, go for it. We appreciate it. Always willing to learn. And then for,
Yeah, go on. Give your Latin degree. Let's hear it.
right. And then for AC, it's the Grafter and the Vassal Witch Hunters. So that's all the extra solos and the heavy squads. Also included will be the 3D Void Gates that you got through the Kickstarter, extra dice packs you ordered, and the Galaxy lore cards. So that's a lot of stuff condensed down into Wave 1. And the fact that everything else will be coming in Wave 2 is super exciting. They condensed everything from 4 waves down to 2, so we should have everything on the tabletop a lot quicker. This week we also found out the base sizes for the new faction, the Empyreans. So I'm just going to run down that. The Oculus, their Weaver, is 40 millimeter. Their 3 squads, the Strike Force, the Guardians, and the Vanguard, are all on 30 millimeter. The Fulcrum is also on a 30 millimeter. And the Factotum, their medic solo or support solo, will be on a 40 millimeter base. Now the big news is the vehicles, the Interceptor, the Scythe, the Razorbat, and the Zenith will all be on 80 millimeter bases, which I am super excited for.
Yes, that came out of nowhere, because they had in the past implied it was going to be a 50. And so until then, okay, so they had already said, yes, we are going to have larger bases in the game at some point. But for them to just, I'm kind of wondering why they did it. Because it happened within, I think, a month of the initial announcement to they're on 80s. Sorry, you were going to say?
I think everyone naturally assumed at the beginning that it was going to be 120 millimeters, because that's what War Machine and Hordes rocks. But
for a vehicle?
But I think they really wanted to give themselves a little more diversity. So, because they plan to have colossals and very large ships from what they've talked about, I think they obviously couldn't have put the vehicles on 50, because then it looks the same as some of the smaller jacks and whatnot. And you couldn't put it on 120, because then it'd be hard to differentiate the from the colossals and like the motherships and such. So, and I think this is your area of expertise. Does Games Workshop not use 80 millimeter bases for some of their stuff?
No, 80 mil doesn't exist in GW. You go from 60 up to, I think, is it one? No, not 120. That's this game. I can't remember the next size up, but I'm pretty sure it's bigger than 80. It's like 100.
Oh, okay. So little variation. I guess that makes sense. So I just think it gives them a way to make the vehicles look menacing, while at the same time kind of keeping it in scale, because if they did it on a 50, then you got this like little tiny person driving like jack-sized vehicle, and it would really throw the scale of the game off.
No, I completely agree. So when they first showed us the artwork of the Razorbat, it had beneath it a little guide that said it was on a 50 mil base. And so that was my original. I was like, oh, does that mean it's going to be out of scale, or is it going to overhang the base hugely? So when they said we're going up to an 80 mil base, I was much happier with that. Yeah. I think the vehicles are now going to look big, chunky, and really differentiated from everything else.
Which is super nice. I'm very I can't wait to see everything scaled together on the table. I think it'll really have a dynamic look compared to only having 3 types of bases out there. And I think going forward, it'll really give it that full army impactful look on the board.
Sure. How many sizes does Warmahordes use? Does it have 80s?
It does not have 80s. This is the first time, to my knowledge, that Privateer has used 80 millimeter. There's
Oh, interesting.
4 base sizes in Warmahordes. There is 30s for your infantry and solos and stuff. You got your 40s for like your light jacks and stuff like that, and you have your 50s for your heavies and whatnot. And then it jumps right to 120s for battle engines, colossals, gargantuans, all the big boys. It all shares one size.
Okay, very interesting. So the fact that I hadn't known that 80 was never an option before means that I'm not as surprised as others that 80 is now the size of the base. I had never considered, oh yeah, 120 base obviously is the next size up, because that's such a huge difference from 50 to 120. I mean, that's a 120 is a massive base.
Yeah. So now it's really just about like seeing how they render out and how they sit on the base, because like they could still overhang the base a bit, because like some of those vehicles look large and menacing. Like the scythe looks really long. So I'm hoping
for sure. I'd be really surprised if there's no overhang at all.
I'm hoping it's not too wild, because it makes it hard for like placement and whatnot. There's a few models in Warmahordes that like you have to rotate backwards and just like declare to your opponent like, this is my intention of facing, because otherwise it just doesn't work. So that basically covers the news. I hope everyone gets their stuff in a timely manner, and we can all start getting games in when it's safe to do so in your area. By no means do
there is one more thing to mention about the base size though.
Oh,
which is the Empyreans. Their Weaver is the first Weaver, at least, that's on a 40 instead of a 30.
Oh, good catch. Yeah, I didn't even register that yet.
Now, I'm not experienced enough in the game itself to really say, oh, this is the effect that that's going to have, blah, blah, blah. It might not have any practical effect. I don't truly know yet, but it's something to notice, that's for sure.
I mean, its volume is larger, so it'll be a little easier to target over some terrain elements. But at the same time, that gives you a little bit more like of a field of view. So it works both ways. I don't think it affects things too much, other than it's probably going to look sweet, because I love the design of that model.
Yeah, if people didn't guess from the last podcast, I'm loving the Empyreans. They are now the faction that I want to main. And yeah, I'm looking forward to them releasing much more than anything else at the moment.
Yeah, as soon as they released the Empyreans, I started what I've dubbed my Privateer Take My Money Fund.
That's a good idea. Yeah.
They announced so many things in the keynote that I was like, well, I know where my hobby fund is going for the next year.
Exactly. Same here. Although I'm still holding back for when they finally release those big 120mm base models. Whatever they are, I'm buying all of them. That's for sure.
All of them.
Yeah.
Andrew does not discriminate between large base models.
Oh, not at all. Hey, all I'm saying is, if you point me in the direction, I mean, some of the best models, genuinely, some of the best, mass-produced models in the industry, in my personal opinion, and, everyone has different aesthetic tastes, etc., are genuinely some of Privateer Press's Colossals and Gargantuans.
Oh, yeah, 100%. So, little off topic, but in Warmahordes, I'm a Circle player, and they have 2 of, in my opinion, the best looking Gargantuans. There's a giant stone construct.
Yeah, the stone wall.
Yeah. Oh man, it's escaping me because I'm in Warcaster mode right now. But people call it the Stone Monkey, and that's what I call it.
Okay.
And then there is a giant bird called the Storm Raptor, which is probably my favorite Gargantuan in the game. That model is gorgeous
and huge.
And that's one of the ones that I was talking about, that sometimes you have to declare like your intent for facing, because its wingspan is crazy.
Yeah, so I haven't really seen how big that model actually is, but for example, I am considering just going and buying the Everblight Archangel.
Yes.
Because that's a centerpiece model just to have, and I love the Mountain King, the Glacier King. I'm a big fan. Anyway, I got completely sidetracked there, but what I'm saying is I'm very excited to see what Privateer Press does for the Warcaster colossal sizes as well.
Agreed. I see the wingspan of the Storm Raptor, and I'm like, I better see a ship with similar wingspan.
We do have a little bit of an idea, I suppose, in the what are they? Oh, I don't know any of the names anymore. It's been so long since I've cared. The elf guys.
Oh yeah.
Whatever they are.
The Retribution.
Their gargantuan. Yeah, the Retribution. Their gargantuan is kind of a vehicle, isn't it?
No, well, not really.
It looks like a space futuristic-y vehicle to me.
Well, I think you're thinking of their battle engine. That's the Trident.
Oh, okay. Yeah, sure. Could be that. Yeah.
Which they're kind of like a vehicle, so I could see where you got that from. But
sure.
That was a good catch. I did forget that that's the first 40 mil Weaver, so hopefully I'm looking forward to, like, we got 40 mil Weaver. Where's our 50 mil Weaver? Like, we'll see one of those in the future.
Yeah, I'd be surprised if we don't end up with some sort of, heavy Weaver or something. Yeah.
Or like a Weaver on like a speeder bike. Not
yeah,
that's
sure.
something I'm hoping for.
Well, I mean, I am now.
Right.
You mentioned it, but yeah.
Just drive by Furies being shot. But so over the course of the next 3 episodes, I'm going to have several guests on to talk about the different factions and what we know about them so far. This week, we're going to cover Marchers, which I'm going to cover myself because they're my babies. Next week, I'm going to have someone on to talk about the ISA. And then hopefully by then, we get more concrete numbers on the Aeternus Continuum. That way we can talk about them at length and be accurate. Because thanks to Andrew, we have a good chunk of both Marcher Worlds and ISA's stats and whatnot. So we can talk about them in fair accuracy minus the heavy squads and their one solo. So our information might not be 100% accurate on those two, but everything else is straight from the stat cards that are being released.
And also, just the generic feel of the army isn't going to change either.
No, they very much have like set styles of the way they do things. So that was an excellent segue. I want to kick it off by asking you, like, what is your opinion of the Marcher World style? How do you feel they play?
So just to quickly backtrack a smidge, the reason I won't be on is because I don't know enough about this to go into depth, and I wouldn't want to lead people astray. So for those that don't know, I'm going to be playing the audience here. When you say something that I don't understand, I'm going to jump in and ask questions. But I do know the absolute basics. So my view of Marcher Worlds is they are the fastest faction in the sense that when they spike, almost all of their models, I think, when they spike, they can move an extra 3 inches. Which, and I think their Hunter Solo is also, the only model in the game with a 7-inch move at the moment. That might not be true.
They're, in the playtest rules anyway, their character solo, or their hero, sorry, also moves 7.
Oh, well, we don't count the heroes. I mean, they're just insane models, aren't they? That do crazy things. So I don't count them. But yeah, okay. Out of the normal guys, I'll take that. So they are the fastest faction, and they also seem to have the most access to flame weapons, as far as I could tell, or the most good access to flame weapons. Which is, I mean, flame is huge. Fire, it's called fire, isn't it?
Yeah.
Fire is huge in this game. Making, like, if you could have a button that you press that makes every model on the enemy team suddenly gain fire, you'd probably win the game. That's how strong it is. Not even because of the damage, because of the minus to mat and rat.
Yes.
But then also, and this is where they get a little bit confusing, because I'd like to just say that if you want to think of Marcher Worlds, think of them as fast and easy to kill. But that's not true. So in general, they have the higher armor. So like, for example, their Duskwolf is armor 4, whereas all of the other Jacks are armor 3. Now, obviously, in ISA you can put shields on and stuff. But that's a specific build. With Marcher Worlds, you just get armor 4. But then generally, they are lower defense, right? So it's like, okay, so they're easier to hit, harder to kill, except then their Weaver is the other way round at defense 4. So I kind of struggle to sum them up in terms of durability.
I think that has to do with a little bit of their like backstory. Like they're essentially like a coalition of splintered factions that have been chased around the galaxy by the ISA and or other factions, and they have come together to kind of fight back against the man. So you get a little bit of a different play style here and there because it's a bunch of different people sprinkled together bringing their skill sets together.
Sure, and this is basically where I tap out, by the way. If you couldn't tell, I was struggling with even just saying that. So to summarize, they're fast, they have a lot of flame weapons, and they're kind of easy to hit but hard to kill. Okay, over to the person that actually knows what they do.
So I think you hit it on the head when you talked about their speed. I think in true like rebel coalition fashion, they have like a very guerrilla warfare feel to me. They're fast, they hit hard, but then they either get destroyed or they get out of there. So I find myself personally, like, I feel like they are probably the best faction when it comes to trying to get to an objective to score it. But you kind of have to time it. They're not the faction that can sit on an objective to score it, because they're so easy to remove from the board. So I find myself, I tend to bring my units up last and just kind of sneak them onto the points I want to take within the last round or two of turn or two of the pulse round to score it, versus the trying to, like ISA, they're pretty tanky, so they can sit on an objective and tell you to come at them. So I'm just going to quickly touch on the stats we know about for the Marcher World stuff. I'll start with their solos. The Coalition Weaver has a 6 speed, a 7 mat and rat, defense 4, arm 3, and focus 4, which I believe is one of the higher focuses on the Weavers. And then they have a handgun, which is range 8, POW 3, and a battle staff, which is range 1, POW 4. So they're not super aggressive, but they get the job done. I don't think they're the best Weaver of the factions by any means, but their defense lets them hang around. In my playtest games, I've had them missed several times. Their cost, deployment cost is 1, and they have 2 wound boxes. There is a symbol beside the battle staff that is eluding me right now. Andrew, can you allude us to what this is, Mr. Rulebook?
Oh man,
it is like a sideways Wi-Fi symbol. Is your book handy?
Yeah, you keep talking, and I will illuminate.
That a boy. See, I knew you'd come in handy.
This is all I'm good for, yeah.
And then he's our rulebook guy today. And then okay,
for repulsor.
Repulsor.
Oh yeah, of course. Right. So, for those that don't know, I'm just going to read it from the book because that's top-notch quality podcast content. Repulsor: when this model hits a model with an equal or smaller sized base with an attack with this weapon, before damage is rolled, the model hit is slammed 3 inches directly away from this model. Collateral damage is equal to the power of this weapon. There you go.
Perfect.
It lets you push people. It's actually really powerful. Yeah.
I mean, being able to boop someone off an objective or away from contesting an objective is very powerful, so that could come in use for sure. Now, the abilities of the Weaver, they have Arcandric Amplifier. While this model is charged, Fury Ciphers channeled through it gain +5 range, so that gives it a effective 15 range, I believe. Yeah, I'm going with 15 range, because I believe the base range is 10. Oh, yep, there it is. Very next one. Arc Relay, 10. This model can channel Fury Ciphers. A Fury Cipher channeled through this model is a range of 10. So you have 15 range on your Cipher. On your Fury Ciphers, which is pretty good, considering I think a skirmish board is 30 by 30, give or take.
It's 30 by 30, yeah.
Yeah.
Now, I'm going to throw in here with my beginner noob question. I thought that the Marcher World Coalition Weaver there actually had the lowest range. Because I know that, so for the ISA, their Weaver gets base 12, and then when charged, +5. And I want to say and this off the top of my head here, so I'm probably wrong, the Eternus Continuum Weaver is base 13, and then gets +5 when charged.
I think you're right, actually.
Score one for the new guy.
Yeah. See? Contributing. He sold himself short. He was just playing Mr. Modest.
I'm here just to every time you say something, actually you're wrong, because that's great for podcast content, isn't it?
Hey, I mean, we're here to provide entertainment, not to.
We're here for fun, not facts.
Yeah, well, little bit of both, but hey, we're
Okay.
till we get all the information, we're rolling with the punches. All right.
Awesome.
But
anyway, sorry, carry on. Yeah.
I do think they're the only Weaver with a defense of 4. This is probably where he'll tell me I'm wrong also. The AC...
I believe you are correct on that, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, good job, man.
And then they have Fury Reciprocator. When you channel a Fury Cipher through this model, after the attack is resolved, this model can spike to return the Cipher card to your hand, which is very potent. I think I talked about in the last podcast about how I like Cryolock to token something up so it can't act and or take an objective. Now imagine being able to do that on a continuous basis. Like, if your opponent doesn't activate that model the turn it takes off its activation token, then you just token it right back up and it never gets to do anything. With that,
or of course, if you want to do it, I mean, obviously I'm just saying a combo that everybody instantly realizes as well is the one where you put out, the full amount of arc onto a model of your choice.
It has to be a Fury.
Continue in that case.
This is why we love you, Andrew. If that was the case, it would be bonkers.
That's what I thought it was. I was like, oh, wow, you could just keep doing that. Okay, yeah, so you're right. Cryolock is obviously the best choice for that.
Cryolock or the one that does explosive damage. Because when you're facing stuff like AC, the explosive damage comes in handy. ISA does not care about explosives. It gets extra armor against it.
Yeah.
Next up is the Hunter solo, which, as Andrew said, is the most mobile solo outside of the heroes. It has 7 speed, an MAT of 3, an RAT of 6, so it is hyper accurate, a defense of 4, and an arm of 2, so it's very squishy. Its defense is alright, but if you get through its defense, it's probably dying. It is a range 15 POW 4 on its sniper rifle, and it has a combat knife that's range 1 POW 3. So here's the thing, when it's charged up, you're rolling 6 white dice and a red die to hit, which is hyper accurate. Now to its abilities, it has Fire and Displace. Immediately after resolving a range attack made by this model can move up to 3 inches. Normally Marcher's stuff has to spike to move. This gets it just immediately after shooting, which is super powerful. You can move out of contesting something to shoot something and move back into it. You can duck out from cover to shoot and get back behind cover. It has unlimited uses and makes it very mobile and pretty hard to kill. So that's essentially like a 10-inch movement on its turn. And then it has Mimetic Cloak. I'm just going to butcher words this whole cast.
That was a good one. You did that. Yeah.
While this model is charged, it gains stealth. A model with stealth cannot be targeted by attacks made by models more than 8 inches away. So stealth isn't quite as powerful as it is in Warmahordes, but I mean, it's with that move back 3 and whatnot, it's fairly easy to gauge your opponent's threat range and duck in and out of it. And then the sniper rifle has arc booster. When attacking with this weapon before making a damage roll, this model can spike once to cause the target of the attack to suffer -1 arm until the attack is resolved. Which, I love anything in this game that reduces armor. So you can roll 7 dice to hit, and then you spike, and you can roll whatever you did up and beyond their defense as damage dice, and then you -1 off their armor to make it easier to apply that damage. So I think Marchers, as far as being able to reduce things damage between the sniper rifle and the railgun, is really strong for when it actually hits people. They're no AC with their holophage cannon, but we'll get into that in a different episode. On to the Ranger Fire Team. So this is a good example of what Andrew was talking about, where they're very mobile, but very squishy. I typically run 2 to 3 units of the fire team because they're so good at taking objectives, and the Ranger heavy support is very slow. It's obviously a 3-man unit. Their deployment cost is 2. They have 6 speed, 3 MAT, 3 RAT, so that's pretty average. Defense of 3 and arm of 3, so they're fairly easy to hit and kill. They have a battle rifle that's range 12, POW 4. A null detonator that's range 6, has no POW but has a very cool effect, and a fusion blade, which is range 1, POW 3. So they have an ability called Slip Displacer. Once per activation, this squad can spike to move up to 3 inches, which if you're trying to, if you drop them the second last turn in a pulse round and you need to hustle them over to that objective to score it, super useful. Their battle rifle has mechanical optics. While this model is charged, this model gains +4 range. So that gives them an effective 16 range on their battle rifle. So you can move 6, shoot 16 if you want. So that's a 22-inch range. And then spike to move back 3. Or you can, I guess actually, yeah. I was thinking you could spike before. Spike before you shoot. But then you don't get the +4 range. So. And then their null detonator. This one is huge. Nullifier. This weapon causes no damage. Instead, clear 1 arc from a unit or void gate hit by this weapon. I've had cases where an opponent has dropped a void gate close to me, and I have put why is it escaping me? Andrew, the cipher that lets you shoot twice. Reiteration complex.
There you go. Cool.
You use Reiteration Complex, and you can strip 6 arc off of something, either destroying your opponent's gate or destroying a gate and stripping arc off of one of their squads or just units in general. So the null detonator is huge. You have to be slightly closer between the speed and the spike. You can get within a 15-inch threat range with it, but it is super powerful. Now, my baby, the Duskwolf, which is the Marcher World's light jack. It has 5 speed, 4 strength, 4 MAT, 4 RAT, a defense of 3, so again, fairly average, and an arm of 4. It has 3 hit points and a deployment cost of 2. It has 4 different cortexes. It has a fighter cortex, the neural net cortex, the scout cortex, and the sniper cortex. Its hard points are shoulder, left arm, and right arm, and it has 5 weapon points, that is pretty average for all the light jacks. Its abilities. It has Arcantric Turbine. This model gains +1 speed for each arc it is currently charged with. So if you charge it with 3 arc, that gives the light jack a speed of 8, which is the fastest light jack currently in the game. And then it has Slip Displacer. Once per activation, this model can spike to move up to 3 inches. So after you move your 8, if you spike going down to 2 arc, that's an 11-inch move. That is over a third of the board in a skirmish match, which is insane. Here's its cortex options. The fighter cortex gives it rapid strike. When this model makes an attack during its activation, it can make 1 additional melee attack with each of its melee weapons. So if you double up melee weapons on it, that's 4 melee attacks without using a cipher card. There is the
Quick question. Are you planning to go into like different loadouts for it soon? Or are you going to leave that for another time? Because if you're going to leave that for another time, I think now's a good time to bring up something. But if you're going to wait, I will also wait.
I think we're going to do like a full episode just devoted to different loadouts. I might mention a few brief things here and there about what I like to do with them. But I think we could devote like a whole hour and a half episode to just talking about how to load out certain jacks for certain situations.
Well, I will, because I know nothing about the faction, I will quickly add this in now. If you're going to take the fighter cortex, then the Duskwolf has a weapon called Ripper, which in the playtest documents didn't have cleave, but Ripper gained cleave. It's now a range 2 power 4 weapon with cleave. If you run him into a squad of guys, you are practically guaranteed to take them out. Yeah. Anyway, that's it. That's my one contribution to this podcast.
And that's without using the cipher that lets you attack everything in your range. So the amount of attacks you can put in with the Ripper is pretty bonkers, especially if you load 2. So just to get it, since we touched on it, the Ripper is a range 2, which I believe it gained a range, if I'm not wrong. I think it was range 1 in the playtest documents.
Yeah, I think every single melee weapon on the Warjacks, apart from one, went up to 2 range. Only one of them stayed at 1 range.
Which really increases their effectiveness. It's range 2, POW 4, and as you said, cleave. If this model destroys an enemy model with an attack with this weapon, it can immediately make an additional attack with this weapon. Attacks generated by cleave cannot generate further additional attacks. Wow. Okay, so I'm going to have to throw this question out to the ether after this cast is done. There is... I can't remember the cipher name. I am slacking. That lets you make a melee attack against everything in your range. I'm wondering if each thing, like if you have 3 members of a squad in your range and say a jack, I wonder if each kill with that cipher procs an extra attack. Because if so, that could be quite nutty. Like, you could kill a whole squad and a jack with all those free attacks. That would be, counting the fighter cortex, 4, 8, 11 attacks. Like, that's insane. Even with bad rolls, you should be able to drop a jack plus that squad. So, there was definitely an improvement there. So back to the different cortexes the Duskwolf has. There is the Neural Net Cortex. This model gains a cumulative +1 defense bonus for each other friendly unit within 5 inches, up to a bonus of 3. So that actually helps the weak defense of the Marcher Worlds, bringing up to a 6. And if you were to use your combat engineer to tune up the Duskwolf, would give you a 7 defense, which is very hard to kill. The Scout Cortex grants Pathfinder, which lets you move over rough terrain. And then it also grants Smart Lock. While charged, this model ignores cover when making a ranged attack. Which, this is the Cortex I typically use with my Duskwolves. Because being able to ignore cover in this game is absolutely massive. Cover is so prevalent because most maps are so jam-packed full of terrain. And being able to roll those extra red defense dice is huge in most cases. So being able to just ignore that completely, just for having an arc on your jack, which I usually have 2 to 3, is amazing. My typical loadout for a Duskwolf, at least 1, if not 2, will be a railgun on the shoulder and 2 battle rifles. So that's 2 16-inch shots and 1 18-inch shot, which is 2 POW 4s and a POW 5. If I'm not mistaken, I'm just going to double check the railgun real quick. Yep, POW 5. And it also has the arc booster ability that the sniper rifle of the hunter has to lower your opponent's armor by 1. So, when you're ignoring cover, you're charged up, you can really, really put a hurting on some of your opponent's things. So I personally think the Scout Cortex is the best. And then the last Cortex is the Sniper Cortex. It has advanced optics. This model's ranged weapons gain +2 range. So that brings the battle rifles to an 18-inch range and the railgun to a 20-inch range, which is really good. But unless you're on elevation, most maps have quite a bit of terrain, so it is hard to see that far on a map. So not always the most effective, regardless of how good that sounds. So we're just going to touch on a couple of the weapons here. I'm just going to run down the list of weapons that the Duskwolf can be equipped with. There is the Wildflower. It has Eruption. This model can choose to use Eruption when it makes its attack during its activation. If it does so, all other models in 3 inches of it suffer a POW 3 explosion damage roll. So you just walk up to something, use... this is a shoulder weapon, by the way. You walk up to something and you just say that you're using your attack. There's no... According to this, there's no attack needed. Just everything within 3 inches takes a POW 3 explosion damage roll. Which, against some of AC's infantry, which have a really low armor, can be really good. And then there's the Slug Gun. This is an arm weapon. The Slug Gun has that same push that the Coalition Weaver has on his staff, so it's a slam. Range 8, POW 3. So that gun's meant to slam and get some collateral damage in. The Wildflower costs 2 to equip. The Slug Gun costs 1. We have our first melee weapon. It's an arm. It is the Impaler, and it has armor piercing. When resolving a damage roll for an attack made with this weapon, reduce the target's armor by 1. It is range 2, POW 2. So if your setup is hyper accurate and you're getting to roll lots of extra dice on damage, Impaler might be very good for you. And then my personal favorite gun, the Railgun. It's a little more expensive. It's a shoulder weapon. It costs 3. But it's a range 18, a POW 5, so it hits like a truck. And then, when attacking with this weapon, before making a damage roll, this model can spike once to cause the target of this attack to suffer -1 armor until the attack is resolved. So, POW 5, -1 from their armor. That's potentially a lot of damage put onto your opponent. And then there is the Flamethrower. It's an arm weapon that costs 2. It is a spray, which sprays in Warcaster are a little different than sprays in Warma Hordes. It's just a direct line in Warcaster. It is range 10, POW 3, so that's pretty strong. And it lights things on fire. And Andrew talked about how powerful lighting things on fire can be. And then we've already talked about the Ripper, range 2, POW 4. Whenever it destroys an enemy model with an attack, it can make an additional attack. And it also only costs 1. And it is a melee weapon. And then another one of my favorite weapons, the Blazer. It costs 3. It is a shoulder weapon. It's range 14, POW 4. It lights things on fire when you hit them, and it has strafe, which is roll a red die, and you can target something within 2 inches of your original target, equal to the number of strikes rolled on the dice. So that's up to 3 targets you're lighting on fire with that thing. Very effective for clearing out objectives. Sometimes I'll use it to kill 1 or 2 things on an objective and light a jack on fire to make it less effective on its next turn. So maybe it's not able to remove my stuff as effectively, because in my opinion, being able to trade pieces over top of the objectives is like the most important thing. Like, being able to kill warjacks is great, but if you can't get your squad to an objective or get your opponent's squad off of the objective, that's a moot point. So I think I'm just going to go over quickly a couple of things I like to do with marchers. Typically, in a skirmish game, you have eight things you can put into your loadout. I typically run 2 Duskwolves. Sometimes I run them with double battle rifles and railguns for both of them. But I often do 1 double battle rifle, 1 railgun, and 1 blazer, 2 battle rifles, because then that's potentially 5 attacks to try and remove stuff from an objective. I run 2 of their combat engineer because he can take an activation token off of a warjack if he spikes, and give them the tune-up special effect, which gives them +1 RAT, MAT, and defense, which is very powerful. And then I usually do 1 hunter, 1 coalition weaver, and 2 units of the ranger light squad, because their mobility, they can get to an objective and take it turn 1. The major difference between skirmish and full-size games is, in a skirmish game, you score at the end of your unit's activation, and anything can score an objective. Where in a full-size game, you have to be able to hold that objective till the end, and scoring is at the end of each pulse round. So, in skirmish, being able to get to the objectives early and score them really makes the difference. So speed in that case is huge. In full-size games, being able to have something with a little more staying power or being able to body block for your units is a much bigger deal. My typical first turn for both skirmish and full-size games is I deploy a heavy jack, a combat engineer, and usually one other solo. Typically the hunter, because it's fast and can get up the board to deploy a void gate. Turn one, I usually start with my ranged Duskwolf, my ranged Strike Raptor, which will have 2 railguns and 2 battle rifles on it. And I will use my combat engineer to tune it up and take the action token off it. And I have my Strike Raptor only move up like 4 inches or so the combat engineer can stay with it. But that leaves me the ability next turn to move my full distance and potentially put a real hurting on something because it's tuned up and ready to go with its 18 and 20 inch range with the Sniper Cortex. After that, Warcaster is a very ebb and flow game, so it's very reactionary. So there's no past what you deploy turn one. There's really no hard and fast rule. Have you, in the game you played, Andrew, did you find any combination of deployment that you liked?
Combination of deployment. I'm going to be honest, no. Do I have anything of value to add to this? I don't think so. I think one of the big things. Okay, the only thing I can really say, but this isn't March Worlds exclusive. This is just a generic thing you might want to consider. Is you might not always want to put out 3 models. This will depend on, do you have the cipher card that allows you to remove an activation token? And are you expecting one of your models to get killed turn 1? I mean, hopefully you're not, but it might happen. If you're expecting either of those things, or, you have the correct cipher card, then 3 models on the board is good. But if you're not going to do that, 2 models might be better, because otherwise what will happen is as you play your 3 models, obviously your first activation, you move 2 of them, and then if you don't lose any of them, or you have no way to remove the activation token, your second pulse turn, your second turn, you'll only have 1 model to activate, which is obviously a huge issue on the second turn. So
that's a very good point, actually. You brought up a major strategy I like to use when I play. A lot of the times I will go out of my way to kill my opponent's solos. That way they only get 1 activation, because you can activate 2 solos in the same turn, but you can't activate a squad and a jack in the same turn. So if I'm keeping your solos off the board, you're only getting 1 activation a turn, which is a huge disadvantage. So that's where coming in, where potentially first turn only dropping like a jack and your combat engineer comes into play, because then you don't need to necessarily spike with your combat engineer to remove that action token from your jack. You can put that if you're not holding Arcane Synthesis, you can put that 1 arc on your jack first turn to get him ready for next turn, because you're clearing him. And effectively that gives you 3 turns in a row with that jack, because turn 1 you move up a little, you move your combat engineer up behind him, you tune him up, and your next turn you remove those activation tokens. And then you can move your full distance with it. You can shoot at whatever you want, And then you can activate your combat engineer to remove the action token off them, so you can use them for a third turn the following turn. And when it comes to the arms race of your heavies versus your opponents, that can be a very big swing. So that's a very good point, Andrew, and something people need to keep in mind, that more models in Warcaster doesn't always mean better.
Yeah, we might want to put that on the docket for one of the podcast episodes, a generic tactics kind of thing.
I think
I have just told you the only one I know, though. So
you know what? Yeah. I was thinking about that when I was out for a walk today, and I meant to mention it, but I'm glad you had my back on that. But I think that is like a very generic overview of Marcher Worlds and just a little bit of what we like to do with them. Obviously, not all of us, cough Andrew, have models in hand yet. So once that happens, I'm going to go in depth playtesting in multiple different scenarios. I might try and get some tabletop simulator in, and we're going to deep dive on tactics in an upcoming episode. But for now, I'm just going to we're going to get one player that is very adept with each faction on, just to kind of go over what their faction does, like I just did, and how they typically go about running their faction, or what they think their faction is good at doing. Like I said, the Marchers are very mobile. They're very good at getting to objectives, but not necessarily holding them. The Jacks hit very hard and are very fast. And the combat engineer is very good at making sure you get multiple activations out of them. But outside of that, I think they're pretty easy to hit, and their arm is fairly low, so they take damage quite easily. So it's really Marcher Worlds are glass cannons. They hit pretty hard. They're very fast, but they do not necessarily have like the ISA staying power. With that, I think we covered most of what I wanted to cover. Do you have any final thoughts, Andrew?
Not really. I suppose my only big thing to say is that it's still early days. You know, I think anybody that's making a claim of this is the best way to play this is the strongest way or anything like that is saying that prematurely. And so understand that as we are going through this, and I say we very loosely here, obviously, as other people are going through this, keep in mind that if you're looking at the game now as which is the strongest faction, you're going to be really disappointed in 6 months. We don't have all of the base units, I'm going to say, for every faction yet. I don't think we will until a year down the road. Then we might, have some valid arguments for which is the strongest faction, which is the strongest loadout. But until then, it's just fun speculation, because we know we're not playing with a full set yet.
Yeah, 100% agreed. Nothing we say on this podcast right now is a hard or fast rule on what's best, how to play, how you should go about doing your turns. This is simply just our experience so far. And as we get more games in, as the community learns together, we'll fill in a few of the gaps. We'll discuss best practice, stuff like that. I think for my final thoughts, I'm excited stuff is shipping. I hope everyone gets their models in a timely fashion. And let's just make this game the best we can. Let's promote it. Let's get community involved. And let's just make it the best we can be, guys. That being said, I hope everyone out there is staying safe and healthy. And thank you for listening to our podcast. And we will talk to you guys next time.
Thanks for listening, everybody. See you when the podcast comes back around to having easy beginner questions for me.
Yes, we'll see you in a couple episodes, Andrew.